The neighborhood of Whispering Pines was the kind of place where lawns were manicured to the millimeter, and secrets were buried even deeper. To the outside world, the Harrison family lived a picture-perfect life. Arthur Harrison was a high-powered corporate attorney, and his wife, Eleanor, was a prominent socialite who spent her days organizing charity galas. They lived in a sprawling, three-story colonial mansion with pristine white pillars and a wraparound porch. But inside those grand walls, the air was perpetually cold. The center of their universe, or at least, the center of their obligations, was their 6-year-old daughter, Lily. Lily was a striking child with pale skin, dark hair, and wide, expressive eyes that seemed to look right through people. But Lily didn't talk. Not since the incident a year ago, which the Harrisons strictly forbade anyone from mentioning. She communicated only through intense, unblinking stares and a tattered, button-eyed teddy bear she clutched like a shield. Because of Arthur and Eleanor's demanding schedules, Lily was raised by a revolving door of nannies and maids. None of them lasted long. Some quit within a week, claiming the house felt heavy or that the little girl's silent, stalking presence gave them the creeps. Others were abruptly fired by Eleanor for minor infractions, like leaving a speck of dust on the grand piano. The mansion had become a graveyard for domestic staff, a place where people came to earn a quick paycheck and left with frayed nerves. That was until Clara arrived. Clara was a woman in her late 40s, with kind, tired eyes and hands that bore the calluses of a lifetime of hard work. She didn't have much, just a single suitcase and a heavy heart, carrying the quiet grief of losing her own daughter to a sudden illness years ago. When Clara stepped through the front doors of the Harrison mansion, she wasn't intimidated by the grand architecture or Eleanor's icy, condescending instructions. She just saw a massive, lonely house that desperately needed a mother's touch. On Clara's very first day, the warning signs began. Eleanor handed her a strict schedule, emphasizing one rule above all others: do not coddle Lily. She has a routine, she has her tutors, and she does not need to be distracted. Keep your distance, do your work, and don't let her disrupt the household. Clara nodded politely, but the moment Eleanor left for her afternoon luncheon, Clara felt a chill up her spine. She turned around to find Lily standing at the top of the grand staircase, peering through the wooden banisters. The little girl's gaze was locked onto Clara with an intensity that felt almost physical. Clara smiled warmly, hoping to ease the tension, but Lily didn't smile back. Instead, she slowly descended the stairs, her tiny footsteps making no sound on the plush carpet. She stopped exactly 3 feet away from Clara, holding her tattered bear, and just stared. As the days rolled into weeks, Lily's behavior grew increasingly bizarre and obsessive. She refused to leave Clara alone. No matter what room Clara was cleaning, no matter what chore she was doing, Lily was there. If Clara was in the kitchen scrubbing the marble countertops, Lily would sit quietly under the breakfast island, her knees pulled to her chest, watching every movement of Clara's hands. If Clara went to the master bedroom to change the linens, she would turn around to find Lily standing silently in the doorway, half hidden by the heavy velvet drapes. It wasn't the typical, attention-seeking behavior of a lonely child, it felt like a silent, desperate surveillance. Lily would follow Clara down the long, dimly lit hallways, keeping a strict, unvarying distance of a few paces behind her. Whenever Clara stopped and turned around to ask, "Do you want to help me, sweetheart?" Lily would instantly freeze, her wide eyes widening further, refusing to speak a single word. The strangeness escalated when Lily began leaving bizarre gifts for Clara. They weren't the usual drawings of rainbows or flowers that a 6-year-old might make. One morning, Clara opened a supply closet to grab the vacuum cleaner and found a small, neatly folded piece of paper on the shelf. When she unfolded it, she found a chaotic scribble of black crayon, thick, heavy lines that aggressively scratched out the faces of 2 figures standing outside a large house. The next day, Clara found a small, broken porcelain doll placed directly inside her uniform pocket. The doll's head was cracked open, and its tiny plastic eyes had been deliberately scratched out. Clara felt a knot form in her stomach. Was the little girl projecting some kind of deep-seated trauma, or was this a hostile warning? Despite the unsettling nature of these tokens, Clara didn't feel fear, she felt a profound, aching pity. She recognized the invisible walls of trauma all too well. However, Lily's relentless shadowing did not go unnoticed by the rest of the household. Eleanor Harrison began to observe the strange dynamic with growing irritation and a strange, flickering anxiety in her eyes. One evening, as Clara was preparing dinner, Eleanor swept into the kitchen, the scent of expensive perfume doing nothing to mask her sharp, aggressive tone. She saw Lily sitting on a stool in the corner, her eyes glued to Clara as she chopped vegetables. Eleanor's face hardened. She grabbed Lily roughly by the arm, pulling her away. "What did I tell you, Clara? You are here to clean, not to entertain my daughter's delusions. Lily, go to your room immediately." Lily didn't cry out or resist, she simply let herself be dragged away, her eyes locked onto Clara until the kitchen door swung shut. Eleanor turned back to Clara, her voice dropping to a harsh, threatening whisper. "If I catch her lurking around you like a stray dog one more time, you'll be packed and gone before the night is over. Do you understand me?" Clara apologized quickly, but as she looked at the kitchen door, she couldn't shake the feeling that Eleanor wasn't angry because Lily was wasting time, she was terrified of what Lily might be trying to tell the maid. The threat from Eleanor should have been enough to make Clara keep her distance, but the next morning, the atmospheric pressure inside the mansion shifted drastically. Arthur Harrison, usually a distant and stoic figure who left for his law firm before dawn, stayed late. Clara found him pacing the study, his face pale, frantically whispering into his phone about an auditor and missing files before slamming the receiver down. The tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Yet, despite the volatile mood of her parents, Lily's obsession with Clara only intensified. It was as if a countdown had started in the little girl's mind. She no longer just watched Clara, she began actively trying to manipulate her movements. While Clara was dusting the high bookshelves in the library, she felt a gentle, persistent tug on the hem of her apron. She looked down. Lily was there, her tiny fingers gripping the fabric with surprising strength. The girl wasn't looking at Clara's face, she was looking toward the heavy, locked mahogany door at the back of the library, a room Clara had been strictly forbidden from ever entering. Clara knelt down, matching the little girl's height. "Lily, you know I can't go in there." "Your father keeps the key," Clara whispered, keeping her voice low so the heavy footsteps of Eleanor upstairs wouldn't interrupt them. Lily didn't let go. Instead, she did something she had never done before. She reached up, took Clara's calloused hand, and pressed something small and metallic into her palm. Clara closed her fingers around it, her heart thumping against her ribs. It was a key, cold and heavy, tarnished with age. Where had a 6-year-old found a key to her father's private sanctuary? Before Clara could ask, the sharp click of Eleanor's high heels echoed down the hallway. Lily instantly released Clara's apron and vanished behind the long velvet curtains, leaving Clara standing alone with the illicit key burning a hole in her pocket. The re-hook was set. Clara was no longer just an observer in this house, she was an accomplice to whatever secret the child was desperate to unearth. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxiety. Every time Clara passed a mirror, she felt like she was being watched, not just by Lily, but by the house itself. The contrast framing between the pristine, wealthy exterior of the Harrisons' lives and the rotting, terrified reality beneath it was becoming impossible to ignore. Why were these wealthy parents so terrified of their own silent child? Why did they look at her not with love, but with a guarded, defensive panic? Later that afternoon, while Eleanor was out attending a committee meeting and Arthur was trapped in his study, Clara found another clue. She went to empty the trash bin in the master bedroom and found a shredded document. It wasn't just torn, it had been meticulously destroyed. However, a few pieces had fallen outside the bin. Clara picked them up, piecing together fragments of a medical report from a prominent children's psychiatric facility. The words, induced trauma, selective mutism, and corporate liability, stood out in stark, chilling black ink. Clara's mind raced. Was Lily's mutism not the result of a tragic accident, but something intentionally triggered? Before she could process the thought, she felt that familiar, icy presence behind her. She turned around. Lily was standing in the master bedroom doorway, holding her tattered teddy bear by its arm. But this time, the bear looked different. Clara stepped closer and noticed that the seams along the bear's back had been crudely ripped open and restitched with thick, uneven blue thread. Lily raised her tiny hand, pointing a single finger directly at the bear's belly. She gave a sharp, definitive nod, her wide eyes reflecting the dim afternoon light. Clara realized the girl wasn't just playing, she was executing a carefully calculated plan. The little girl refused to leave the maid alone because Clara was the only person in the house who didn't look at her with guilt or fear. Clara was her only lifeline. Determined to find answers before her shift ended, Clara waited until the mansion fell completely silent during the late afternoon lull. Standing before the locked mahogany door in the library, her hands trembled as she pulled out the key Lily had given her. It fit perfectly into the brass lock. With a soft click, the door swung open, revealing a dark, windowless room that smelled heavily of old paper and ozone. This wasn't a standard home office. The walls were lined with filing cabinets, and on the desk sat a bank of digital monitors displaying live security feeds from every single room in the house, including Clara's own small staff quarters. But what caught Clara's eye was a large, heavy safe in the corner, its door standing slightly ajar, as if someone had departed in a desperate hurry. Resting right on top of the open safe was a legal ledger with Lily's name embossed in gold letters across the front cover. Clara stepped inside, the floorboards groaning softly beneath her weight. She reached out to touch the ledger, her breath catching in her throat as she realized the true scale of the danger she was walking into. Just as her fingers brushed the leather cover, a shadow fell over the doorway. The temperature in the room seemed to drop to absolute zero. Clara froze, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs as she slowly turned around, terrified of who, or what, she was about to face in the darkness. Clara's heart stopped as the shadow in the doorway elongated against the dim light of the library. She braced herself, expecting the furious, icy glare of Eleanor or the calculating, dangerous presence of Arthur. Instead, she looked down to see the small, delicate silhouette of Lily. The little girl stepped into the hidden room, her wide eyes reflecting the blue glow of the security monitors. She didn't look afraid, she looked determined. Lily walked past Clara, completely ignoring the bank of surveillance screens, and pointed directly at the open safe. Inside, beneath the gold-embossed ledger, lay a sleek, black digital voice recorder and a stack of confidential legal agreements. Clara realized that Lily hadn't stolen the key, she had found it after her father, unraveled by his recent corporate panic, had carelessly left it behind. Clara reached into the safe, her hands trembling as she picked up the voice recorder. She looked at Lily, who gave a slow, deliberate nod. With a shaking thumb, Clara pressed the play button. The audio began with static, followed by the unmistakable, sharp voice of Eleanor Harrison. "We can't just keep her locked away forever, Arthur. The auditors are looking into the trust fund. If they realize what happened to the real inheritance, we're ruined." Arthur's voice boomed through the small speaker, sounding defensive and strained. "The trust fund is legally tied to Lily's well-being. As long as she is deemed mentally unfit and incapable of speech, I remain the sole executor of the estate. The court cleared us after the accident. Do you think I want to live like this? We just need to keep the nannies away from her." The last one was asking too many questions about why Lily doesn't leave her room. Eleanor hissed back. "Well, the new maid, Clara, is already getting too close. I see the way Lily watches her. She's trying to tell her something. If that woman uncovers the truth about the night Lily's biological parents died, we won't just lose the money, we'll go to prison." Clara staggered back, the breath completely knocked out of her. The mid-story twist hit her like a physical blow. Arthur and Eleanor weren't Lily's biological parents at all. They were her aunt and uncle, who had legal guardianship over her after a tragic accident that had claimed the lives of Lily's actual parents, an accident that Arthur had legally covered up to seize control of a multi-million-dollar inheritance trust. Lily's selective mutism wasn't a natural psychological reaction, it was the result of severe, calculated emotional abuse and intimidation designed to keep her terrified, isolated, and silent so her guardians could legally retain control of her fortune. Lily didn't refuse to leave Clara alone because she was a creepy or disturbed child, she clung to Clara because she had overheard her aunt and uncle plotting, and she knew Clara was the only person in the house who wasn't paid to keep her imprisoned. Suddenly, the heavy mahogany door slammed shut behind them with a deafening bang. The lock clicked into place from the outside. The room plunged into near-total darkness, save for the eerie blue hum of the security monitors. Clara rushed to the door, rattling the brass handle desperately, but it wouldn't budge. From the other side of the thick wood, a cold, mocking voice echoed. "I told you, Clara." Eleanor's voice was venomous, stripped entirely of its polite socialite facade. "I told you to keep your distance and just do your job. But you people are always so painfully predictable. You think you're saving a child, but you're really just signing your own eviction notice. Or worse." Beside Clara, Lily didn't panic. Instead, she reached into the torn seam of her teddy bear's belly, the very seam she had pointed to earlier. With her tiny fingers, she pulled out a small, modern flash drive that she had hidden deep inside the stuffing. It was the missing piece of the puzzle, the digital files and financial documents Lily had secretly taken from Arthur's desk weeks ago, knowing they held the proof of her parents' true legacy and the fraud committed against her. She pressed the flash drive into Clara's hand, her grip fiercely tight. "Arthur is already on his way back with the security team," Eleanor warned through the door, her footsteps pacing back and forth. "They will find the stolen documents on you, Clara. A history of theft, an unstable disgruntled employee taking advantage of a wealthy family. Who do you think the police will believe? You're going to help us fix this, one way or another." Clara looked at the flash drive, then at Lily's face in the dim monitor light. The little girl's silence wasn't a prison anymore, it was a fortress. She had protected this evidence with her life, waiting for someone she could trust to help her bring the walls down. Clara knelt down, wrapping her arms around the trembling girl. "I've got you," Clara whispered fiercely, the memory of her own lost daughter fueling a sudden, burning resolve. "I am not leaving you behind." On the security monitor displaying the grand hallway, Clara saw the front doors swing open. Arthur Harrison stepped into the house, accompanied by two large men in dark suits. The countdown had ended, and the trap was about to spring. The heavy footsteps of Arthur Harrison and his hired security team echoed through the monitor speakers, drawing closer to the library. Inside the locked room, Clara's mind raced as she gripped the flash drive. She looked around the dimly lit space, refusing to let panic paralyze her. Her eyes darted from the bank of digital monitors to the heavy, old-fashioned writing desk. Nestled right under the desk's edge was an auxiliary landline phone, its small red power light blinking silently in the dark. It was an old backup line, likely forgotten by Arthur in his reliance on encrypted digital networks. Clara scrambled across the floor, pulling Lily with her, and grabbed the receiver. She quickly dialed emergency services, pressing her mouth close to the plastic. "My name is Clara Vance," she whispered, her voice a sharp, urgent hiss. "I am trapped inside a hidden room at the Harrison Mansion on Whispering Pines Drive. They have locked me and a 6-year-old child inside. They are destroying evidence of a major financial fraud and a fatal cover-up. Please, you need to listen to what is happening right now." Instead of hanging up, Clara set the phone down on the desk, leaving the line wide open to the emergency dispatcher, capturing every sound in the room. Just then, the heavy mahogany door rattled violently. The brass lock turned with a harsh, metallic screech, and the door swung open. Arthur Harrison stood in the frame, his tie loosened, his face twisted in a mask of pure, desperate rage. Behind him stood Eleanor, her eyes manic, flanked by the two private security guards. The contrast framing was absolute, the high society pillars of the community now looked like common criminals caught in a desperate corner. Arthur stepped into the room, his eyes instantly landing on the open safe and the flash drive tightly clutched in Clara's hand. "Give it to me, Clara," Arthur said, his voice deceptively low and menacing. "You have no idea what you're interfering with. That flash drive contains highly sensitive corporate data. If you hand it over right now, we can write you a check that will ensure you never have to scrub a floor for the rest of your life. Walk away. Leave the girl, take the money, and forget you ever worked here." Clara stood up slowly, stepping directly in front of Lily. Shielding the little girl with her own body. I know exactly what's on this drive, Arthur. And I know what you did to Lily's parents. You didn't just inherit this estate, you stole it. You broke this child's spirit and forced her into silence just so you could bleed her trust fund dry. Eleanor let out a sharp, hysterical laugh, stepping forward into the room. And who do you think is going to believe a word you say? Look at you. You're a grieving, penniless maid with nothing to your name. We are the Harrisons. The police answer our calls, not yours. By the time we're done, the narrative will be clear. You had a psychological break, you broke into Arthur's private safe, you tried to extort us, and you held our traumatized daughter hostage. The guards will remove you now, by any means necessary. Arthur nodded to the two large men, who stepped forward, their faces expressionless as they reached out to grab Clara. But before their hands could make contact, the final reveal shattered the room's tension completely. Lily, who had spent the last year trapped in absolute, impenetrable silence, stepped out from behind Clara. She drew a massive, deep breath into her tiny lungs. She didn't cry, and she didn't whimper. Instead, she pointed a trembling but unwavering finger directly at Arthur, and her voice rang out, clear, loud, and resonant, piercing the quiet of the mansion like a silver bell. You pushed them, Lily said. The entire room froze. The security guards halted in their tracks, looking awkwardly at each other, then back at Arthur. Arthur's face drained of what little color it had left, turning a sickly, ghostly white. Eleanor staggered back against the doorframe, her hand flying to her mouth in sheer horror. The little girl refused to leave the maid alone because Clara was the only person who gave her the courage to finally find her voice. Lily, shut your mouth. Arthur roared. Taking a violent step forward, his professional composure completely disintegrating. You pushed their car, Lily repeated, her voice growing stronger, tears finally spilling over her eyelids but her gaze remaining fiercely locked onto him. I saw you through the window. You argued with Daddy at the top of the ridge. You pushed the car over the edge. You told me if I ever spoke, you would do the same to me. The absolute silence that followed was deafening. The security guards immediately took a step back, raising their hands away from Clara and Lily, realizing instantly that they were no longer protecting a corporate client, they were standing in the middle of a double homicide confession. From the desk behind Clara, a loud, clear voice suddenly emanated from the forgotten landline receiver. Units are already en route to your location, the police dispatcher's voice boomed through the quiet room. We have recorded the entire exchange. Do not touch the child. Officers will be on site in exactly 2 minutes. The final threads of the Harrisons' carefully constructed illusion unraveled in a matter of minutes. The distant, wailing sirens of police cruisers cut through the quiet, manicured streets of Whispering Pines, growing louder and more frantic until the driveway was flooded with flashing red and blue lights. Arthur Harrison sank into the leather chair behind his desk, his face buried in his hands, completely broken by the weight of his own exposed crimes. Eleanor pacing the floor, shouting frantic, empty threats at the officers as they crossed the threshold, but the authority she once wielded like a weapon evaporated the moment the steel handcuffs clicked around her wrists. The private security guards quietly cooperated, pointing the detectives toward the open safe, the digital voice recorder, and the open landline phone that had captured every single confession. Clara did not watch them get led away. Her focus remained entirely on the little girl sitting on the library floor. The moment the police entered the room, the immense adrenaline that had sustained Lily's voice vanished, leaving her incredibly small, fragile, and trembling violently. Clara immediately dropped to her knees, pulling the child into a warm, protective embrace, shielding her from the flashing cameras of the forensic team and the loud, chaotic demands of the investigators. Lily buried her face deep into Clara's shoulder, her tiny hands clutching the back of Clara's uniform with desperate, white-knuckled strength. For the first time in an entire year, Lily began to cry, not a silent, suppressed weep, but deep, heavy, healing sobs that washed away the long months of terror and isolation. As the house was cleared, a gentle child services advocate named Detective Miller approached them. She knelt down beside Clara, looking at the two of them with immense empathy. The paramedics are outside, Clara. We need to take Lily to the hospital for a routine medical check, and then we will need both of your statements. Because there are no immediate family members who aren't implicated in this investigation, Lily will have to be placed in temporary protective custody. Hearing the words protective custody, Lily's sobs suddenly stopped. She pulled back from Clara, her wide eyes instantly filling with panic. She looked at the detective, then back at Clara, and reached down to grab her tattered teddy bear. With trembling hands, she held the bear out, pushing it gently into Clara's chest. "Don't leave me," Lily whispered, her voice raw and fragile, but completely clear. "Please stay." Clara felt a profound, aching warmth bloom in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced since the day she lost her own daughter. She looked at Detective Miller, her eyes shining with tears but filled with an unshakable determination. "I am not going anywhere," Clara said firmly. "I will ride with her in the ambulance, I will stay with her at the hospital, and if the state allows it, I want to apply to be her emergency foster guardian. She has spent far too long surrounded by people who only saw her as a secret to be kept. She needs someone who actually sees her." The detective smiled softly, nodding her head. "Given what you did today, Clara, and how the child responds to you, I will personally advocate to ensure you two stay together throughout this process. You saved her life." Months passed, and the grand, cold colonial mansion on Whispering Pines was seized by the state, eventually sold to cover the massive legal debts and restitution required by the courts. Arthur and Eleanor Harrison were swiftly convicted, facing lengthy prison sentences for financial fraud, child abuse, and the reopening of the vehicular homicide case involving Lily's biological parents. The multi-million-dollar inheritance trust was legally restructured, locked safely away until Lily reached adulthood, overseen by an independent, court-appointed trustee who ensured not a single penny could ever be misused again. But the true victory didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened in a small, modest two-bedroom apartment on the other side of the city. The contrast framing was beautiful, there were no grand white pillars, no marble countertops, and no high-tech surveillance systems. The rooms were filled with mismatched furniture, the scent of home-cooked meals, and walls adorned with bright, colorful drawings of suns, flowers, and two figures holding hands outside a small, cozy home. On a warm afternoon, Clara sat on the living room sofa, folding laundry. The sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the room. She looked up as she heard the front door open, and Lily ran inside, wearing a small school backpack. Her cheeks were flushed with color, her hair was tied back, and she no longer carried the tattered teddy bear like a shield. It now sat peacefully on her bed, its ripped seams neatly mended with soft, loving stitches. Lily dropped her backpack on the floor and sprinted across the room, jumping right into Clara's lap, laughing out loud. "Clara! Look what I drew in art class today!" Lily shouted excitedly, holding up a bright piece of paper. The drawing showed a big, beautiful tree with deep roots, and underneath it, a woman and a little girl laughing together. Clara pulled Lily close, kissing the top of her head, her heart completely full. The little girl had refused to leave the maid alone, because deep down, her heart knew what her voice couldn't say, that Clara was the mother she had lost, and she was the daughter Clara had been praying to find. In the end, they hadn't just uncovered a dark secret, they had built a brand new, beautiful family from the ruins of the past.